Welcome to the first webinar organized by the DigitAF European project team. And we will be online today until 12:30 to talk about tools on carbon farming. And I am Romane Dallavera, Communication Officer within DigitAF projects. And I have the chance to present today with Gerry Lawson from EURAF, Christian Dupraz from INRAE, and also 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 from Louis Bolk Institute. So we'll go through the agenda of today. So first, a few words about DigitAF. Then our three main topics for today are agriculture and agroforestry on mineral soils by Gerry Lawson. Then we will have using the high-SEF model to design the low carbon label regulation for agroforestry systems in France by Christian Dupraz. And finally, our third main topic will be carbon tools in DigitAF, experiences from the Dutch case study from 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿. Then after that, we will briefly present 𝐓𝐿, which is a platform developed by our sister project, 𝐓𝐿. And finally, at the end of this webinar, we have allocated time for a short question and answer session. So if you have questions coming to your mind during the webinar, please don't hesitate to write them down on the chat page, and we will either have time to answer them during this question and answer session, or we'll get back to you later. Also, I wanted to inform you that this webinar is recorded, so a replay will be available at the end. So first, a few words about our DigitAF project. I will go very briefly into that so we can go very quickly to our three main topics of the day. So DigitAF is meant for digital tools to boost agroforestry. It's a European project, so it's funded by the European Commission, and it's gathering 24 partners from 19 countries. All the partners are written down here on the slides, and our main mission is to provide digital tools to boost agroforestry in Europe in order to meet climate, biodiversity, and farming sustainability goals. So again, today, the objective is to talk about tools on carbon farming. And that leads us directly to our first topic from Gerry Lawson, which is agriculture and agroforestry on mineral soils. So I will just put on the slide. Okay, Gerry, if you want to go on.
Okay, thank you very much, Romane. And I'll ask you to move the slides forward because this is Microsoft Teams and it doesn't like Linux machines very well, so it's easier for you to do that. So thank you. So just to mention, I think the full slides will be available, and you see at the bottom that there's a couple of policy briefings with more information when you get those full slides. So next slide, Romane. Go forward. Yep, thank you. So definitions and eligibility. So pause on the definitions. What you're about to see is a list of the key definitions within the CRCF, so the Carbon Removal Certification Framework Delegated Act for Carbon Farming. This is the latest draft. The red ones are a couple of additional definitions which EURAF is proposing, and we hope that 𝐂𝐀𝐢𝐵 will accept those. First of all, we need a definition of agroforestry which is measurable. and preferably measurable using satellite images. So rather than counting the number of trees, which is very difficult in a hectare, we're proposing it's based on tree crown cover. So at the moment, this is a draft proposal for what agroforestry means in terms of the carbon farming regulation, not in terms of other regulations. Secondly, we need to forest. You'll see a definition proposed again by EURAF, where we're seeking to ensure that the definition used is the national definition of forest and not the global FAO definition, which is used, for example, in the EU deforestation regulation. So it's very confusing that there are two official definitions of forests. So since we have to be tied into carbon emissions calculations, it should obviously be the definition used in the EU LULUCF regulation. And thirdly, we're just giving a definition of what landscape features mean. So the other definitions there I think are quite useful there in terms of measurement error for sampling, and also the model prediction error. So we'll come on to that later. Romain, next slide. So again, in the draft regulation, latest version, you see this wording for agricultural practices, for agroforestry practices. So it's including agroforestry as being tree planting inside parcels. And it mentions silvoarable, silvopastoral, agro-silvopasture, and also the planting of woody elements between those parcels. And then it talks about agroforestry within permanent crop systems. Do note, however, that it's possible to stack. It's possible to consider an agricultural practice in the alleys between the trees, together with a tree practice. So your plot can be divided into different types of practices, and the collective benefit of those can be included in the monitoring, reporting, and verification. So next slide. Next slide is the third eligibility. So the previous one was talking mainly about, yeah, we're going forward. Yeah. So the previous one was talking about carbon mainly, but we seem to be slipping. We've gone forward, Romain. Can you go back? Yeah. Yeah. So this is emphasizing that it's not just carbon, that it's also nitrous oxide. Although interestingly, the Commission has largely ignored emissions from methane, which is probably justified in terms of the fact that those emissions from mineral soils, particularly if those are dry, are pretty low and don't need to be accounted. So next slide, thank you. So this slide shows that, of course, the picture is much more complicated than just carbon. So there are a whole lot of nitrogen conversion processes, nitrification and denitrification that take place. The uptake from the roots happens across a wide area. It happens to great depth. So these are the sort of complicated processes that in an ideal world have to be considered within the models that Christian and Bas are going to be talking about. The models obviously won't be able to consider all of these, but trees are powerful things. I think the crucial thing to mention is that roots, there's a lot of biomass of roots below ground, but there's also a lot of fine roots, and that fine root turnover can actually be quite fast. So you don't see it, but the half-life, some experiments we did in Scotland a long time ago show that the fine root turnover half-life can be as fast as 40 days. So that's a lot of carbon that's getting pumped into the soil, and a lot of it at depth. Now, next slide. Next slide, Romain. So therefore, what are the practices? We've come up with this list in DigitAF of 30 potential carbon farming practices, of which 8 are agroforestry. And the last 2 columns is a question of whether you can actually stack the carbon farming, or just stack the agroforestry together with the other types of agroforestry. And we're saying, yes, that can be done, with the possible exception of conservation tillage, no-till, where you need to do more some pruning of the tree roots to stop them competing with the crop roots. Next slide. So that's the first 14 carbon farming practices. There's another 15 types of practices which we're suggesting maybe a useful typology. Next slide. So the next slide shows the eligibility requirements for carbon farming. So practices which reduce nitrous oxide emissions are only eligible if they complement other practices. Similarly, with conservation tillage, it's only eligible combined with other practices. Grassland improvement or agroforestry should not take place on land that has had a change of use recently. Biochar, potentially very important, as we'll see later, but it has to be accounted separately. Biochar has been looked at increasingly as a permanent carbon removals. So the price that you get for biochar will be higher than a temporary carbon removal. So it also says that agroforestry must be done in a way that has a minimum impact on soil health, and also says that we need to be sure that the trees that are planted are going to continue to grow well in future climate conditions. So that's quite an important condition. And it also says that the proposal should say something about nitrogen use efficiency. Next slide, please. So therefore, I showed on the previous slide, next slide, I showed that we're looking at 8 different types of agroforestry. You can see them in the second column. So wood, alley cropping, food forests. Next slide, we'll give examples of those. Next slide. So wood pasture number 1, the difference, okay, stay there. The thing about wood pasture is that it's on agricultural land. Where we're talking about forest land, we would tend to call it forest grazing, and that would be type number 9. The moment I'm just talking about agricultural land. Next slide. So alley cropping, growing crops between lines of trees, crops growing within the alleys. Next slide. Next slide is food forests, which can actually be on agricultural land or forest land. Next slide. Next slide is alley coppice. This is a type of agroforestry because in all European member states, short rotation coppice is considered as an agricultural land use. So you have a mix of a tree land use and an agricultural land use. Could be called coppice with standards, but it's potentially, particularly if we're talking about energy production, potentially very important. Next slide. So number 5 and number 6 are related to either intercropping within permanent crops. And next slide for number 6 is grazing within permanent crops. So next slide, Romain. Okay, next slide. Number 7 is when you have a mixture in time of a silvopasture and a silvoarable system. Next slide. And then finally, we have all the trees along the edges. These are different because they're usually protected, and farmers usually get 100% payment for those as long as those hedges or shelter belts are actually registered as this thing called landscape features. So next slide. Next slide. Okay. Fine. So we need to be sure what is forest land and what is agricultural land. This is an example from Extremadura in Spain, where all the colors, apart from the gray, are actually listed as forest in the Joint Research Center map of forest. Whereas in the agricultural map in Spain, there's something called 𝐓𝐿𝐴𝐶, which comes from the land parcel identification system. Only the deep green areas there are actually classed as being forest. So we have a huge error getting in, which is largely due to agroforestry. So we have 200,000 hectares of forest in the LPIS, in the 𝐓𝐿𝐴𝐶 system, whereas the Joint Research Centre says that there's almost 1 million hectares. This is a cause of major error that we've got to eliminate soon. Next slide, Romain. And just an indication of this is some of the work that we're doing towards getting a map of how much agroforestry there is in Europe and how much agroforestry there could be in the future. So the deep red areas are the areas of tree deserts. Those are the areas where we're saying there should be much greater focus on planting of trees. Next slide. Whereas I think the next slide shows, then keep going, the next slide shows, yeah, okay, just hang on there if you can. Watch this, yeah, okay, don't worry, let's stay where you are, Romain, stay on this one, I'll keep talking about it. So this, I just found this information last night, a very interesting database from France that appears to be showing those areas of forest, which are bigger on parcels, which are bigger than ½ hectare, together with those areas which would be called forest on the basis of their tree crown cover, but they're actually registered in the French 𝐓𝐻𝐿 system, so they're registered on the LPAS as being agriculture. So if you like, that's agroforestry. The yellow is the agroforestry area. It's not perfect yet, but it's a good improvement. So you can see those codes, so Bois Pâturés and whatever are being classed as being agroforestry on this map. But there's a lot of other features potentially available which are not yet mapped within this system. Next slide. Next slide, Romain. Yep. So co-benefits. One of the things that the current regulation says is that all all carbon farming projects have to demonstrate no significant harm to the environment, and they have to do it in 6 areas. Those are the 6 areas there. So clearly they have to mitigate climate change, which they will do. But they have to mitigate climate change also in the areas that are not currently included within the CRCF, which at the moment include the emissions from enteric fermentation or from animals, and also from slurry. So they have to have no significant harm for climate change adaptation, for use of water resources, for a transition to the circular economy, for prevention of pollution, and for prevention of and for the biodiversity and ecosystems. But they need to go further than that. So it's not just no significant harm. In the case of biodiversity, they have to prove a positive benefit for biodiversity. That's a challenge. How do we go about proving that? Next slide gives some options. Next slide, Romain. Okay, so it's been considered in a policy briefing from EURAF and also in another policy briefing produced by this Credible project, which a number of options are there. The current regulation is actually quite flexible, and it says that if you introduce an activity which scientific literature shows as being beneficial, then that's all you need to do. But there are various options using indicators where we can more and more quantitatively demonstrate the nature value, the biodiversity value of different practices. So the next slide takes us through those quite quickly. Next slide, please, Romain. So keep going, next one. Right, so this is what the legislation currently says. So the promotion and protection, restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems can be demonstrated using these methods. So as I say, as long as you can prove that the activity, the carbon farming activity that you're implementing has been demonstrated in the scientific literature to have a beneficial effect for biodiversity and protection or restoration, that's enough. It should also potentially contribute to one of the measures mentioned in the Nature Restoration Regulation typology of measures, and it should be shown to be relevant to the habitats which the member states report under the Habitats and Bird Directives. Specific case for agroforestry is that it should also conform to the guidelines produced by DG Klima for biodiversity friendly afforestation, reforestation and tree planting. So people doing carbon farming projects for agroforestry should read this document and make sure they comply with that. Next slide. Okay, keep going. So in terms of the nature restoration regulation, it's not there are 3 indicators suggested in that for biodiversity, which it would be good if a project can conform with those. And one is talking in terms of agricultural, and this indicator of agricultural land with high diversity landscape features. So that's for agricultural land. Next slide. Next slide. Yep, this is talking about, yeah, we've gone too far. One slide before. Yep, so this is talking about the indicators suggested in the nature restoration regulation for forest biodiversity. And the worrying thing, the 3 indicators there which are starred are unfortunately also indicators which are likely to contribute to the intensity of forest fires. So in Southern Europe, there's real worry that these member states are obliged to increase these indicators, whereas in reality, they're increasing the likelihood of damaging forest fires. But that's for another talk. Next slide. Next slide. Yep, thank you. So just one side. Yeah, okay, well, let's just go on quickly. So that was using more. So keep going, Romain, one more. Yep, so another option is to use the existing indicators that have been used for many years of agri-environmental quality within the CAP. So these biodiversity is measured by these indicators, but unfortunately not at a geographical level, not at high enough resolution for them to be useful for carbon farming. Next slide. Just more examples of what these indicators already existing with the CAP are, and that's fine. Yeah, one more, good. So keep going. So what we need to do urgently is to provide parcel scale information about the shape of the parcels and some of the soil characteristics, the erosion characteristics at high detail. And this comes back to the availability of environmental and agricultural data at scale. So there are European regulations on this, but very few of the member states comply with those regulations fully. So at the moment, only Austria, Luxembourg, and somewhere else, Portugal, are fully complying with that. But a lot of the light green countries are close, and this is just flagging that those countries that are deep red are providing none of this information in a public way, and that needs to be improved. And the countries which are rose, which are light red, have often, I mean, it's a bit tough on Flanders. I think there's just Flanders just fails because you've actually got to you've got to be approved. It's a very good system that they have in Flanders, but it's not 100% compliant with this system. So just an overview. Europe has got a long way to go in terms of the provision of open data in a way that complies with the most recent regulations. Next slide. So even a country like Italy, for example, it's almost there in terms of some of the northern regions, but the southern regions don't have quantified CAP information. So the DigitAF project is building up a centralized database from those countries where the information is available and providing an API for that parcel-based information to be downloaded. Next slide. Next slide shows the German situation where the northern lenders are providing the data. The southern lenders have the data, but there are problems of confidentiality. So this is the type of parcel-based information available. Next slide. Yep. So therefore, keep going. What we need to do is to make calculations of greenhouse gas emissions at a parcel scale and link that into the way that the countries do their national inventory calculations. Next slide. And we can potentially add a whole lot of improved modern biodiversity monitoring methods, which still need to be reviewed, but there's a lot of modern options. Next slide. And and we need to consider somehow. We'll go just quickly, just go quickly through these because I've only got 3 minutes. These are other environmental benefits, so wind, bioenergy production, soil fertility. All these co-benefits need to be considered. Keep going. Improvements in air quality through the capture of ammonia on soil canopies, increased water storage in the uplands, very important for fighting floods, potential management of floods in the lowlands, and then the use of integrated pest management. All of that is necessary as well to help Europe meet its climate targets. And my last slide is this one. If you want to leave it up there and you scan that with a phone, it should take you to a little game where you can show how it's possible to link the CAP subsidies to carbon farming, because we think this is very important, that you can get a CAP subsidy, for example, in year 0 to do your initial soil carbon measurements. You can get a different subsidy from the CAP in year 1 to plant your trees, and then you're going to get an agro-environment climate measure for year 2, 3, 4, 5 that will give you a maintenance. But what happens after that? At the moment, there's no financial support available once that period finishes, and that's where carbon farming payments coming in to supplement the CAP payments will be absolutely vital. But it needs to be planned, and you need to ensure that the CAP support is not viewed as double funding effectively. Yeah, the farmers need to have those payments as a right, and if the trees grow sufficiently well, then they can enter a voluntary carbon scheme. And then the final stage, which we're not there yet, the final stage will be whether carbon farming can actually be included within the statutory scheme, so as a form of international or European scale emission trading. So it would be part of the emission trading scheme number 3, but we're a long way away from that. So exciting times. Good data is vital, and agroforestry should be at the heart of all carbon farming systems going forward. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you very much, Gerry. So now it's time for the presentation from Christian Dupraz from INRAE, which is about using the ICEF model. So Christian, I will just let you share your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Okay, good morning, everybody. I've seen some well-known names in the list of participants, so good morning to you and good morning to all the others that I probably meet for the first time. It's my pleasure to introduce you to some use of an agroforestry model to design the low carbon label regulation for agroforestry systems in France. So my talk will be much narrower in scope compared to what Gerry said, because I'm only focusing on predicting correctly the carbon impact, the carbon sequestration impact of agroforestry systems, so that the regulations are based on sound data and are really trustable. So okay, I can't move. Oh, okay. So just to remember you that agroforestry systems have a very large carbon storage capacity. On this graph that was provided by a team of INRAE scientists about 8 years ago, we have all the options that farmers have to improve their carbon budget. And you see that on the x-axis line, it's the quantity of carbon that can be stored, and on the vertical axis is the cost of storing that carbon that is indicated. And for agroforestry, we have two options. We have hedges on the far right of the diagram, and inside parcels agroforestry in the middle. You can see that agroforestry, within parcel agroforestry has a huge storage capacity, and hedges have a narrower capacity of storing carbon. But agroforestry has a low cost for that, while hedges are more costly. Indeed, those are very important things for carbon in agriculture, and we need to know exactly how much they do. The motivation for this study was that we have to put into operation some cash value for carbon storing in agroforestry systems, so that farmers have the incentive to engage in this transition to agroforestry. In France, we use labels that certify that you do store carbon. And at the moment, we have a method for certifying carbon storing in hedges. We call that the method A, label bas carbone. It's it's used since August 2021. It was funded by one region in France, the Loire-Atlantic region, but then it was extended to the whole territory of France, and does not include intra-parcel agroforestry system. It's only for hedges. So why do we need a very specific tool for agroforestry? Because carbon sequestration quantities are declaratory. It means that when you plant trees on your farm, you say that your trees will store this amount of carbon during the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And if you do a mistake, if you overestimate the carbon quantity that you will store, you could have to reimburse the money that was granted to you. This could be painful. And also, we need to have predictions that take into account the local conditions. You can't use a unique value for all agroforestry plots all over France, because we have very different soils and climates. So we need to have tailored predictions for specific soil and climate conditions. And finally, tree growth in agroforestry is highly depending on tree-tree competition and tree crop competition. And we cannot use standard forest data to predict the growth of trees in agroforestry. So this is why we are using specific models to do that. To be efficient, the calculator for carbon sequestration in agroforestry systems, and specifically here in alley cropping systems, should predict the tree biomass, the shrub biomass if there are shrubs, the litter biomass, and the soil organic matter. So, and what is expected is that we can provide time series of those data at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 years after tree plantation. And these estimates will be compared to the actual values on the fields for the validation of the payments. So those are very important. So what we have done, we have used the HiSafe model. It's a biophysical model of agroforestry. It was designed to predict the tree biomass of widely spaced trees. So tree growth is really depending on tree competition, tree and crop competition, tree and pasture competition. It takes into account the local soil and climate conditions. It includes the specific agroforestry management, such as tree pruning, canopy trimming, root pruning, and etc. And it includes all the different compartments that we need, above ground and below ground biomass of trees and shrubs, and soil organic matter. So this model fits all the needs. You know that in agroforestry, the trees look different, but they are especially different below ground. It's the dark side of the trees. And this is a root profile with depths of a forestry walnut on the left-hand side and an agroforestry walnut on the right-hand side. And you see that that was for 14-year-old walnut trees. And you see that agroforestry modifies dramatically the root profile of trees. And this is very important if you want to predict correctly the carbon sequestration in the system. You see that for alley-cropping trees, you have a deeper root system, which means that you have this fine root turnover that Gerry mentioned occurring at deeper depths in the soil. And this is important because all the regulations so far, they take into a consideration only the first 30 centimeters of soil to make the calculation of carbon sequestration. So when we use the 𝐖𝐸 model, we can predict the total biomass of the tree from the DBH, and this total biomass includes below ground stalks, coarse roots, fine roots, stump. Those equations are independent of time. They are allometric equations relating the tree biovolume and the tree DBH. And you see on this graph that we have a specific allometries predicted by the 𝐖𝐸 model that are close to urban deciduous trees, but sometimes different. A very important aspect is the model is including the impact of severe pruning in agroforestry, and that's important because it modifies a lot the way the tree is growing and the stock of carbon. When we use the model, we can have the dynamics of the carbon storage in the different pools of the tree biomass. And you have that graph is showing you the different pools of carbon in the tree. The green is the foliage. The green is the labile carbon, the reserve carbon, and the foliage is the very small part on the top of the graph. You see that the most of the carbon, of course, is in the stem, in the branches, and in the coarse roots. So the very important aspect is that our simulations show that the carbon quantity stored is increasing very slowly during the first years and then very quickly during the last years of the tree growth. And for example, you have the same carbon quantity stored during the first 20 years and the next 5 years. So it's very important when you do carbon sequestration estimates for regulations. So the time or horizon when you calculate your carbon storage is very important. That's why we have extended the time frame for the low carbon label method in France to 25 years. Previously, it was 15 years, but we convinced people that it was necessary to take into consideration a larger period of time. Another point that is very important, so that is that that's the same idea, but you have here the differences of tree growth in forestry. It's the A4TF curve, and in agroforestry, in two different plots of agroforestry. That's our 𝐓𝐻𝐿 experiment near Montpellier. And you see that we have the calibration period up to today and the prediction period for the next 25 years. And the tree growth will be much higher during the next 25 years than during the first 25 years. Unfortunately, it's not possible today to take this into consideration in the regulation. The good point of the model is that you can explain why your system is storing carbon or is not storing carbon. And one specific mechanism is the fine root senescence due to anoxia in our experiment. Anoxia is the fact that some oxygen is missing when you have water, how you say that, when it's filled with water, when the soil is filled with water. And this has a big importance because it kills the fine roots of some trees, like walnut trees. And this factor has modifies a lot the behavior of the tree that is forced to regrow new roots the next year, and this changes the growth of the tree. So the model is good to predict the quantities, but also to explain why it's working in that way. So the model can provide time-dependent estimates of scaling factors. Scaling factors are very much used for all those regulations. And for example, the ratio of below ground biomass to total biomass can be predicted. Usually it's a single figure that is used in regulations, but our model shows that it could be dynamic and could be tailored to specific time durations. Also the ratio of carbon stored in roots in the topsoil and in the deep soil is very important, because if you consider only the topsoil, well, you lose a big impact of agroforestry. So some parameters for the low carbon label have been provided by our 𝐖𝐸 simulation. And for example, this is the multiplying factor to scale the total biomass of the tree. So the total biomass is that factor multiplied by the above ground biomass. And you see that for young trees, it's quite high, above 1.2. And for mature trees, it's lower, around 1.1. So that's important because it improves a lot the prediction of carbon storage. But the 𝐖𝐸 model also is important to predict the carbon sequestration in the soil organic matter. And those are predictions of the carbon stored in the humus stock in our soils for agriculture, forestry, and agroforestry. And you see that in our situation, there was first a decrease and then an increase after some years. And agroforestry is somewhere between forestry and agriculture. So this is quite important, but we have understood recently that we were making an error in our calculation because we did not include the fallow vegetation in the simulations. The fallow vegetation is the vegetation, the natural vegetation between crops. So after you harvest a crop, there is a certain numbers of months with no activity on the land, with a vegetation that is growing back. And if you include that, it has an impact on the carbon in the soil. And this was indicated by this first simulation, where you see that at the end, we have included the weeds, the so-called weeds, which is the fallow vegetation. And this has increased during the last years here, I show with my pointer. It has increased the carbon in the humus of the soil. So we, and previously, during all the other years, we did not include the weeds between the crops. So what we have done recently is that we have included the fallow vegetation for all the years. And you see that with the fallow included, with fallow vegetation included, the carbon humus stock is much higher than is higher than without the fallow included when you consider that it is bare soil. So this was something that we did not know until recently. And in 25 years, this taking into account the fallow vegetation, improved the total humus stock by 4%, and the active stock by 12% in our simulation for agriculture. This is for agriculture, but also in agroforestry. So we have to take that into account in the simulations. And the model, again, explains us why this is happening. And the tree fine root turnover is crucial for all these processes, as Gerry said a bit earlier. And the deep fine root turnover is less important, and it may have a counter effect of what we call the priming effect, but I won't go into the details. But if you look at the graph, so the graph on the left is the total amount of dead roots, and the peaks are when you cut the roots with plowing or root pruning. And on the right, it's the cumulative biomass of fine roots in gray, which is very important into the balance of the system. So finally, to conclude, 𝐼𝐸 allows to compute the carbon storage of agroforestry systems, and it can also include a carbon land equivalent ratio calculation, which is a very important value because it may convince people that agroforestry is good for carbon sequestration. That's another aspect, which is to convince stakeholders and policymakers of the efficiency of the system. So the model was upgraded to better account for those climate change impacts. So I won't go into the details, but those are some processes that we included to better take into consideration the impact of climate change on the efficiency of the system. And we have still some processes that needs to be improved, such as the mineralization of residues of perennial crops. So the current version of the low carbon label includes several inputs from the 𝐼𝐸 model. It's currently designed and it will be approved before, I think, the beginning of 2026. And a very important side effect is that the 𝐼𝐸 model has convinced policymakers that we need to include deep soil carbon sequestration in agroforestry systems. As I said earlier, agroforestry trees have deeper root systems, and the model agrees and gives values of the ratio of carbon stored in topsoil and deep soil, both in roots and in organic matter. So, and if the previous methods for afforestation or urban trees did not take this aspect into account. So if a very simple example of low carbon label calculation, if a farmer has a parcel of 6 hectares with some agroforestry systems, like you have that, it could provide him with carbon credits, which depends on the value of the ton of carbon on the voluntary market, of course. But usually labeled agroforestry carbon can be expected to be sold at higher values, higher prices than the average value on the market. In that case, if you consider a range of the ton of carbon between 20 and 80 euros per ton, it will be an annual income of between 200 and 800 euros per year for the farmer if the carbon credit is implemented. That's it. Thanks for listening. That was how we tried to improve regulations with sound figures of carbon sequestration, thanks to a biophysical model of agroforestry.
Thank you very much, Christian. Now we can go on with the presentation from Vas, who will be talking about their experience in the Dutch case study farm. So I guess you will share your slide. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Romain. Yeah, my name is Vas Tisse from the Bolk Institute. We are a research institute from the Netherlands. And we are participating as a living lab in the DigitAF project. So that means, amongst other things, that we're testing a lot of these carbon tools yeah, with farmers and with other stakeholders in our living lab to see how they work, if they're user-friendly, if they're intuitive, if the results are what we would expect from them. So I will talk a little bit about that. And I will test 3 tools today and also compare them a little bit. Let's see. Yeah. So our case study farm in the Netherlands is the 𝐓𝐻𝐿𝐴 farm, which means between the hedges. So agroforestry is really in the name. It's an organic family farm, a dairy farm. They have sandy soil and about 100 dairy cows. Yeah, almost everything is permanent grassland. Most of it is owned, and 20 hectares is natural grassland where they do sort of more natural management for nature objectives. So recently, the son of the farm he took over, 𝐓𝐿𝐴, he's on the left in the photo. He took over the farm of his parents, and he said, I want to take it over, but I want to diversify it. So I want to start doing other stuff than just the dairy farming. And agroforestry was also one of the things that he took on as a challenge. So a little bit about the agroforestry system. So he started planting trees in around 2019, 2020. He started first with 0.5 hectare of agroforestry in his pasture that he uses for the calves. So he calls this the fruit field. He has apple, pear, and he has a little bit of fodder hedge with hornbeam, I believe. And then there's 2.5 hectares of agroforestry mostly with nuts, so walnuts, chestnuts, previously also hazelnuts, but I think a lot of those trees also died. Yeah, so this gives a little bit of an overview of his system. Yeah, you can see the tree spacing is like 20 meters between the rows and 7.5 meters in the rows. So it's he can still mow between the tree strips. Yeah, we have some available data on the farm, which is really nice. So in the Netherlands, we have this thing called kringloopwijzer. Most dairy farms, for instance, that deliver the milk to 𝐓𝐿𝐴, a major dairy cooperative, they have to fill it in anyway, and it stores a lot of data about the farm. It also calculates like a footprint of the farm. And also he took a lot of soil samples the past year, so that is nice. We can use that information to as inputs for the models. Yeah, so then to the part of the digital tool testing. So all of the living labs in DigitAF at the moment are busy with this exercise. And so I just give a little bit of a tip of the iceberg of what we've been doing. So the tools we're testing are the farm carbon calculator. It's a whole farm greenhouse gas inventory tool. So it's for sequestration, but also really for the emissions of the livestock, of all the machinery. Then we have 𝐂𝐻𝐿. It's a carbon sequestration tool based on design choices like which species of trees at which density, etc. And then the wish was to test the Open Farm Carbon Tracker, which is another DigitAF tool, but I don't think it includes trees at the moment, so I thought it was a little bit less relevant for now. I chose another tool, which actually also doesn't include trees at the moment, but I think it is interesting to compare to the other tools, mostly with 𝐂𝐻𝐿. It's called the praktijktool bodemkoolstof. It's a Dutch developed tool, and that's for a whole farm level of soil carbon sequestration. And this was developed by Wageningen Environmental Research, and also our institute. We contributed a lot in a research project. Yeah, so the questions I had for the farm carbon calculator were how much can carbon storage in agroforestry compensate these greenhouse gas emissions on the farm? The second question is, how is carbon storage modeled compared to 𝐬𝐻𝐿, which obviously also includes the sequestration in the trees. So that was a comparison exercise. And then for 𝐬𝐻𝐿, yeah, the question 1 is the same as question 2 for the farm carbon calculator. But basically what I wanted to do in 𝐬𝐻𝐿 is compare the soil carbon storage with the praktijk bodemkoolstof. So these are the 3 questions that I will go into. So first, the farm carbon calculator with the question, how much can it store and how much can it compensate the greenhouse gas emissions? So as model input, I just used the newly planted agroforestry system, so not the existing hedges and tree rows that were already there, because we lacked a little bit of information on that, on those systems. Then the model output, yeah, it gives a balance of sequestration and emissions over a 1-year period. Some considerations we had to take were, do we include or exclude the inventory, which is all the farm buildings and machinery? And it really comes to a bookkeeping problem, like how, yeah, how are you going to make the balance? We excluded the inventory, so we said all of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with all of the farm inventory is cancelled, is depreciated at the moment of acquisition. So these types of things have to be taken into consideration when doing these type of calculations. Yeah, one result that we had is, at the moment, the sequestration is still very, very, very minor. So the totals of emissions for our calculation come to 259 tons of CO2 equivalents, and the sequestration is still only 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's very, why is that? Why is it the case? The system is still quite young, so the model calculates with very low yearly sequestration rates. One other thing that I didn't successfully include yet is the soil carbon sequestration. I think that's a technical thing I have to fix inside of the modeling that I didn't get to work yet. One thing that I also noticed is that to see the system evolve through time is not very easy. So you have to, if you want to see what is it in year, what is it like in year 30, for instance, you have to duplicate the report and then adjust the age categories of the tree, and you have to compare scenarios. But all of these steps inside the modeling exercise are not very intuitive, and yeah, as a user, you just want to have an option to see how the system develops over time. But that's a little bit tricky. So just to check, are we very far out with our emission calculations? Did we do something wrong? It seems, at least from the UK benchmarking, this is another option that the tool gives, that we are not extremely far off with our emission calculations per hectare. So it gives some idea of where we are in terms of emissions. Yeah, so that was the farm carbon calculator. Then on to 𝐬𝐻𝐿. So the question, how is carbon storage modeled compared to the farm carbon calculator? So
Vas, I'm sorry. Can
yes.
I just sorry, I'm going to stop you. Some people cannot see your PowerPoint. Can we just stop the sharing and reshare to see if it's working? Sure. So sorry.
That's all right. What about now?
Okay. Laura, can you tell us if you can see the? Okay, it's working.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I'm so sorry for that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so what I did is I compared, or my idea was to compare the walnut trees of 15 density of 15 trees per hectare in both of the tools, at a period length of 30 years, which was the maximum period for 𝐬𝐻𝐿. And so that we used soil data from the farm to initialize the 𝐓𝐻𝐿 part of the model, which is a soil carbon model that it's built into 𝐬𝐻𝐿. The only real data point that we didn't use was the growth density data, because we didn't have that yet, but we have it available soon. So this is how you, in the bottom, you see how the data is input into the 𝐬𝐻𝐿 tool. Yeah, and then in the farm carbon calculator, I saw two options. Actually, the first option wasn't ideal because there was no option for less than 20 trees per hectare for the agroforestry category. That's, you see it on the bottom left. There was no option to select fewer than 20 to 50 stems per hectare. Another option was to include them as individual trees, assumed deciduous, and then you have to estimate the tree crown under each tree, which I did on a publication here from Germany. They did a lot of allometry measurements on walnuts in Germany. So I took that as a source. So these are how the results come out. So one thing I already noticed, I mean, the difference is still quite big in my opinion. One thing that, for instance, the Open Farm Carbon Tracker doesn't mention is, does it include above ground biomass or below ground biomass? Does it include soil organic carbon? What are the components that are taken into account into this number? So I haven't found detailed documentation on this. Maybe it's there, but it's not very easy to find or to see. So in 𝐬𝐻𝐿, it's clear that it's above ground biomass, it's below ground biomass, it's soil organic carbon, and it's also has its own leaf litter model. Yeah, so interestingly, 𝐬𝐻𝐿 comes to a lower carbon yearly sequestration rate. If you see any errors in my calculations, please let me know, because I hope that won't be the reason that they come out different. I really think it's the models that do it a little bit different. Yeah, so another bonus comparison I did is this with this paper from 𝐓𝐻𝐿 from walnuts in Germany. And they only did above ground biomass, so I assumed a similar root shoot ratio as 𝐬𝐻𝐿, which was 0.26. And also here I took another, made another comparison of the 15 trees per hectare in year 30, and there 𝐓𝐻𝐿 is a little bit higher. It is more comparable to the Open Farm Carbon Tracker, actually. Yeah, it's what's also interesting to note is 𝐬𝐻𝐿 uses allometric equations from urban trees. So that's one way that they try to include the freestanding effect of the tree, free from much competition with other trees, like in a forest setting. So the third one is the praktijkpoel bodemkoolstof. Then the question again was, how is carbon storage in the soil modeled compared to 𝐬𝐻𝐿? So again, the results are quite far apart. I would say here the most extreme deviation, even though both of the models are 𝐓𝐻𝐿 based. So basically using the same computations in both of the models. A little bit more information on this tool is described in this paper. It's an English version, so it's easy to understand for everybody. So a little bit more about what could be the result, what could explain the differences in results. So one thing, 𝐓𝐻𝐿 is very sensitive to the weather data, so moisture, temperature, as was done in sensitivity analysis in this paper. So in the red circle, you see like in a wet year, the balance is actually negative, whereas in a dry year, the balance is positive. And this is accounting whilst keeping all the other factors the same. So the yeah, all the other variables in the model are kept the same. And only the amount of only the weather data has changed, basically. So it has a huge effect on carbon sequestration. And so we know from the praktijk tool 𝐓𝐻𝐿𝐴, it uses the nearest weather station, multi-year historic data. Also, you could say it has to use different climate models, but it has an impact for sure. And 𝐬𝐻𝐿𝐴, it uses I don't know what data it uses for the weather. So that's one thing. It's kind of a black box in that sense. So it could be a big reason that explains the differences. Another thing is that the bodemkoolstof tool, it can calculate over variable soil depth. So you always know what soil depth are you talking about, because it matters a lot. So in this case, we calculated over the 10 centimeters because that's the available data that the farmer had. And in 𝐬𝐻𝐿𝐴, it's not indicated what the soil depth is, although they talk about the depth of a plow layer, but I'm not clear if that's what they mean by the soil depth or how it's taken into consideration. Then the last thing, it doesn't really matter in this case, but it's interesting to demonstrate, is carrot has a fixed crop rotation. So there's two options, and they have like fixed settings for what the crop, what the order of crops look like in the rotation. And in the praktijk tool bodemkoolstof, the user can adjust the crop rotation, and you can copy that crop rotation into the future. But it allows for more user tweaking of the of your individual case. Also, the praktijk, both tools allow for changing the soil settings. Praktijk tool bodemkoolstof doesn't allow for the bulk density, which is interesting. It calculates the bulk density on pedo transfer functions and on the basis of soil maps and stuff like that. But it does allow also for the organic inputs, so like manure inputs into the system, which obviously can also contribute a lot to the carbon storage in the soil. And in 𝐬𝐻𝐿𝐴, it's I think it was 25 tons per hectare per year of dairy cattle slurry for the grassland crop rotation. So it's also fixed. Then the last thing, carrot has a leaf litter model, which so it also includes extra inputs from trees. And the bodemkoolstof tool, it doesn't include many tree species. Somehow it has willow inside. Sorry, it doesn't have pear inside. It's a 𝐓𝐿, which means leek. Thought I read pear, but it's a 𝐓𝐿. So there's only one tree species modeled in the praktijk tool bodemkoolstof, so that the agroforestry component is really lacking. So to come to conclusions or recommendations, in my personal opinion, I think further harmonization and the integration of agroforestry carbon models is needed. So the outputs of models, I think, are not sufficiently comparable while seemingly having similar inputs, at least to the user, the casual user, which I think a project manager or a farmer that doesn't know all the details or the workings of the model, they don't have this knowledge of how the model works. So what also is interesting, that a lot of the models, they allow users to enter different input data, and not all possible input options are always made available in each model, even though sometimes they are built on the same core, like the 𝐷𝐻𝐻 model. Then for the individual tools, I think the farm carbon calculator can benefit from improved agroforestry data. The carrot tool, to me, seems superior for modeling tree carbon, but I think the soil carbon modeling could be improved. And the other way around, the praktijk tool bodemkoolstof seems to me superior for modeling soil carbon, but agroforestry is not yet integrated. So I think, as a user, this would be my 2 cents to the discussion. So thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Beth. Now we have some time to present you the digital platform for the agroforestry community, which is 𝐓𝐿forest. I don't know if Sarah from 𝐓𝐿forest is here.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Yes, perfect. Do you want to share your slide, or I can share your slides if you want to? I have them just right now.
Yeah, you can share them if you like.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you, Roman. Hi, everyone. Really interesting webinar so far. Thanks for having me and inviting us to form part. Just to have a final wrap up for this webinar, we wanted to invite you to join 𝐓𝐿forest's digital platform. So our digital platform is designed for the agroforestry community. We have different features which I'll explain later on, but just to explain a bit what the platform is about. So the 𝐓𝐿forest engagement platform is a European platform that supports the adoption of agroforestry, and we do this by providing scientific tools, fostering collaboration among stakeholders, and giving access to features such as the Knowledge Hub and the toolbox that we've just launched. Our goal through this platform is to help stakeholders across Europe to use agroforestry by sharing knowledge, tools. So a lot of the tools that were presented today, that's a great example of types of tools that we want to be included in this platform, and we're very happy to discuss what other tools can be implemented within the platform. And our target is quite a wide scope. So we're looking for farmers, advisors, researchers, policymakers and agricultural stakeholders to join, as well as the private sector and NGOs. And if you pass on to the next slide. So just to explain a bit how the platform works. So there's a news feed, which you can think of kind of like a social media platform for agroforestry professionals. So like a Facebook for agroforestry, where you can post updates about your own projects, about any insights, any research, or any news that you think is relevant to share with the community. And we also have, apart from the Knowledge Hub and the toolbox I've already discussed, we also have some active working groups. And we're looking for partners to join the working group, particularly the networking engagement working group. So this one is all about, well, it's in the title, about networking and engagement. So keeping the community up to date with upcoming events, webinars like this. And yeah, with this working group, we're targeting communication officers and anyone responsible for communication and dissemination, but also kind of general project managers, project officers, anyone who needs to stay up to date with what's happening in the wider community. So yeah, I invite you all, if you're interested in joining, to scan the QR code. If you just put your phone up to the screen, you can scan that. Or you can write a message in the chat saying you're interested, and then myself or Roman can reach out to you later with more details and a link. I'll also copy the link into the chat now, so you have it for those who can't scan the QR code. Yeah, I've just sent the link in the chat. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this presentation of your platform, 𝐓𝐿forest. So you have the link in the conversation, the discussion in the chat if you want to join the platform. So we invite you to join this platform, to stay tuned. And now, because this is the end of our webinar, we have time for a question and answer session. So I think, Gerry, you asked one question to Christian, and also maybe we won't be able to answer this right now, but Laura wanted to know the source from your first graph, Christian, the one about the reduction of CO2, I guess. But we could just write it down in the conversation. Okay, so Gerry, you had one question for Christian. Which is oh, Gerry's coming back. Can you hear us, Gerry?
Yes, I can, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Great.
Good. So you had one question for Christian, right? About the period. You wanted to know if 25 years was enough for the activity period in label bas carbone, because the draft was proposing 30 years.
Yeah,
I can
maybe. I'm not very aware of the CRCF rules and proposals, but this duration for the activity of carbon storing we had a lot of debate about that. Previously, it was only 15 years, and we tried to improve that to 25 years. I think going further to 30 years or more years has something not very practical, because it will be beyond the life of the farmer. It's very complicated to have a scheme that will be longer than the expectation of the farmer to stay on his farm. So that's probably the reason why initially it was only 15 years, and it's maybe 25 years if it is approved. I'm not sure about that. But of course, I agree with you, Gerry, that trees need time and store more carbon when they get older. So my hope is that there would be a new scheme at the end of the first one to take to trade the carbon that will be stored later. But I was told that it was not that easy, because it could be considered that trees are there and there is nothing new that justified that you have carbon credits after. So it's something I don't master at all. So maybe, Gerry, you have better ideas on that.
Well, the only point to make is that the older the tree is, the more harvestable wood products there are, and that is a long-term removal of carbon from the system. If you're talking about harvesting trees quickly, then generally you're talking about a lot of the product will be wood chip, or it will be paper, which is a very short life. You really want to get as much timber as possible into construction materials. But I did mention something in my presentation, which I think will change the whole economics of growing trees, and particularly of pruning and thinning trees, and that's if indeed biochar is considered a permanent carbon removal, which looks like being the case. So maybe something like 80% of the total volume or the total weight of the wood, depending upon the temperature of the retort that you use to produce biochar, that then becomes permanent removal, and you can sell the ton of carbon dioxide for 200 euros as opposed to 20 euros. It's a huge difference, and that will make thinning and maintenance operations much more economic, I think. So that's quite exciting, I think, for the whole of the forestry world, if that does indeed happen.
If I may, I would just have a comment on CARAT and farm carbon calculators. And the third one that I don't remember the Dutch name. I think when I listen to the simplifying hypothesis that those calculators are really far away from reality. When I listen that the root-shoot ratio is fixed at 0.26, when I learn that the weather data used by CARAT are unknown, when I learn that the soil depth assumed by CARAT is unknown, or that the crop rotation is fixed, all those, and the worst probably for CARAT is this tree crown size at year 30 of 10 meters diameter, which is totally, could not apply to many situations. I'm afraid that those models are far too simplistic to give accurate predictions of carbon storage.
Yeah, if I can respond to that,
yeah.
Listen, I think also that is one thing I also wonder, because I think for the soil carbon, the tier 3 models, the more complex models, are more, we have more experience, they're more, and they are already built and converted into more user-friendly models. And I think for the agroforestry, maybe there's still some work to do to match the user friendliness, because that's really good. That's what you need for project developers, for farmers. But to match it to the good models that have all the input data that you need to make an accurate prediction, that is also fitting for your local context, and not just a ballpark estimate. Yeah, but I also wonder what everybody else thinks about this, and I also wonder what the other living labs will find in their comparison of the models, if they come to the similar conclusion.
Anyway, we are ready to compare with our prediction with the 𝐻𝐼safe model for the same system, if you want.
I think that would be very interesting. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Do you have any? Yes, please go.
Well, the thing is why also, for instance, why I didn't use 𝐻𝐼safe now is because I don't know it, and I think it is very complex, but I don't know. So I think that's the natural trade-off, that you want to work with something, give you a good idea, but if it's too complex, it discourages you. But on the other hand, it might give a much better result. So I think that's what the discussion we need to have. And I also wonder what in CRCF regulations, etc., what type of tier model they will require, because yeah, I think if the tier is very simple, if you can use very simplistic models, and one farmer has exactly the same system as the other farmer, and they are neighbors, but they use a different model, you get a different result. That's not the way forward, I think. So that was my concern with these things.
Yeah.
I think, Vas, the current proposals in the CRCF are quite flexible, because they're talking about different processes, and they say for some of the processes you can just use emission factors. For other processes you need to use a model. So there is quite a detailed in the current draft, which I think I've sent you a copy. There is a matrix, if you like, of what detail has to be used for which activity, which process.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Gerry.
Yep. Just maybe a word about the timescale for other people that are listening in. I mean, when I'm saying we've got there is so DG DG Environment, DG Klima are working together with a carbon removal expert group, and they have circulated the latest, confidentially, the latest draft of the proposal. If anybody wants to see the wording as it was in the summer, so April, May, June, have a look at the EURAF policy briefing number 20, which gives a link to the previous less confidential draft. And as I understand it, the Commission are going to be finalising the proposed wording of the Delegated Act for carbon farming by very soon after Christmas, and that will go out for consultation. So it will be completely public at that time, and comments are requested.
And we have a comment from Alice from the Italian Living Lab. She said that she can tell you more about after the application of the tools in the Italian Living Lab.
Excellent.
Do you have questions in the audience, maybe? All right, then. Christian, Gerry, Vas, do you have something else you want to tell?
I think the only thing that I would add is that DigitAF is working quite hard to try to quantify across Europe what agroforestry is. Because we all have different definitions, and it has to be, for the purposes of the CRCF, it has to be quantifiable. So we're looking at land parcel information systems from member states. So I think probably all the projects, if anybody here is involved in another project, then please get in touch with us so we can get together to try and put pressure on the member states, particularly those member states or regions. So that's the southern German regions and the southern Italian regions, and countries like Romania and Hungary and Poland that don't make that information available. We need to collectively say that this scale of information, parcel-based information, is absolutely crucial for carbon farming modelling, and it will be absolutely crucial for the register of carbon farming projects, which DG Klima is committed to producing by 2028. So let's get together collectively and persuade the agricultural departments in all the member states that open data is vital for this process. And by all the projects doing this together and sharing information, I think we can make some progress quickly.
So Gerry, I posted, do you know, are you in touch with the 𝐬𝐺𝐸 project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 𝐬𝐺𝐸 project is doing a good job. It should mention probably that there are two very interesting projects, one called CAFA and one called OGRC, the Open Geospatial Carbon Register, OGCR, which are helping DG Klima with this work to produce a potential register of carbon farming projects, which is geospatial, i.e. it should represent each parcel. So it's not enough to model these things in terms of pixels, 100-meter pixels. We actually have to get down to the farm level, the field level, and potentially also the field boundary level. Doesn't look like we have any more questions from the audience.
You're muted, Roman.
Hello.
Roman, you're on mute.
Roman, on t'entend pas.
I was muted. Thank you, everyone. So I was saying thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Gerry. Thank you, Vas, and also Sarah for presenting the Reforest platform. So don't hesitate to join because it will help us to gather the agroforestry community. It's very, very important. And as Gerry said, you can always help us to share information on your land, on everything, to reach policymakers and to increase the impact not only of DigitAF project, but of every project about agroforestry, because several are still going on, because DigitAF is finishing in 2026, but other projects are still going on. So thank you, everyone. The webinar will be available on replay. So you will be available to see again this webinar or to share it with people who hasn't been able to join. Thank you, everyone. And I will end this meeting right now. Have a great day.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Roman.